this speed. There's a lot of speed, right? But we shouldn't forget that innovation is hard. And I wanted to make that point before I introduce this next speaker, because we're in Silicon Valley. It's like a startup factory, and people have factories. Things move so fast. You can create a startup on a shoestring. But many of university-based and science-based innovation takes a long time to develop. I'm going to make this point here with next speaker, Andrew Bellinger, just because I have it in front of me here. He studied physics at Princeton, mathematics at NYU, got a PhD at Columbia, then he got an MD at Columbia, and then he did his postdoc with Bob Langer, who was on the video just now, and he is spinning out, Bob Langer and himself are spinning out their newest startup from the Langer lab. So even though Bob Langer's lab, which has some 300 plus researchers, and Andrew knows more about that, is in a way MIT's most intense startup factory, this doesn't come cheap and it doesn't come easy. Andrew Bellinger, I am very excited to hear all about novel drug delivery and the path-breaking results that will come from that.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. So when a patient goes to see their doctor today, they go in with the expectation that they will most likely get a prescription for a pill that they'll take every day. When that doesn't matter whether it's a chronic condition or an acute condition, they're likely going to get their pill that they're going to take at least once a day, maybe twice a day. And that pill, in fact, hasn't changed that much in the last 500 years. It's basically a compressed drug in a tablet. They'll swallow it. It will work for a few hours, and then it will pass. We asked ourselves, could we do something really disruptive in this space? Could we make essentially a long-acting, oral, needle-free solution? So when you think about long-acting therapies now, you're thinking about implants, you're thinking about injections into your muscle, and there are a number of those products on the market, and they're actually quite successful in a number of disease states. But when you think about long-acting in the oral space, you're thinking about a few hours. You're thinking about 12 hours maybe. There's a few other technology, actually one local here in California that can do a couple extra hours. We asked ourselves, could we actually do much, much, much different? Could we go out to the kind of duration that implants can get? Could we make an oral pill that would last for a week? You may ask yourself at this point, why would you do that? I think you should ask yourself that question, in fact. What's wrong with the daily pill? It seems to work just fine. We all take, most of us have taken them at some point, and certainly almost all of us will at some point. Why would a once weekly dosage form be any better? Not an obvious question, answer anyway. Will patients prefer that? Will doctors prefer that? Will reimbursers pay for something like that? And then I think the next question is, how are you going to do this? I mean, this sounds a little crazy, but I hope by the end of this talk that you're asking a different question, which is, why hasn't anyone done this before? So there's a number of potential benefits if you could do this. Number one, you have a pharmacokinetic advantage. If you could make a dosage form that would be able to live in your gastrointestinal tract and release drug continuously over a long period of time, like a week, you have a number of potential advantages. You can have continuous drug on target, so you're not having a spike in your drug level that then troughs down much later. You're releasing drug continuously into the body, so you can solve a number of pharmaceutical problems that a lot of drugs suffer from, such as solubility and absorption, because you're releasing the drug continuously in a small amount. You have potentials for more improved pharmacokinetic profile and pharmacodynamic profiles because of that sustainability. And you also have the ability to, once you can make this, to tune the kinds of duration that you want and tune the profile of drug release. So in addition to the pharmacokinetic problem, there's also an adherence problem. And I have to say, so I'm a cardiologist in Boston, and this is really what motivated me coming to tackle this problem, was the realization that patients are not actually taking the pills that we give them. And this is a problem that's been known about for a long time. Actually, C. Everett Koop, who many of you may remember as a Surgeon General in the 80s, famously said, drugs don't work in patients who don't take them. And this problem has been kind of a dirty secret. I mean, I think among clinicians, we're aware of it. We sort of wish it weren't so. and it's certainly a problem that pharmaceutical companies are aware of. But what it is also is it's an opportunity, because if you can take some drugs and improve the ability for patients to take them, you can have a really substantial effect on their efficacy in the long term. And so, for myself as a cardiologist, I sort of thought about this in terms of cholesterol drugs, which are, incredibly safe and well tolerated overall, and have a really substantial impact on cardiovascular disease. But it turns out patients take them about 45% of the time. About 45% of patients take most of their pills. And this, in fact, is a problem in every disease state. So it doesn't matter whether it's causing pain or not. It doesn't matter whether it's chronic or acute. Patients are not really taking their pills. So you may ask, though, why would once weekly be any better? What we do know is that less complex dosing regimens improve patients' ability to take their pills. This is sort of intuitive. You make it easier for patients, they'll take their pills more. You may ask, though, once weekly, well, that sounds a little hard to do. Maybe it's actually easier to have a routine and take it every day. But it turns out there's very limited data on this. But what data there is comes from a couple disease states like osteoporosis, where there are oral once weekly and once monthly therapies. And in those cases, there's really dramatic improvements in both adherence and people's willingness to continue taking chronic therapies for long periods of time if you're able to go to these less frequent dosing intervals. So this seems, I think, relatively obvious, but it's worth saying that in a variety of disease states, if you're able to improve adherence, you can have meaningful effects on outcome. And these are a number of disease states that are big problems. Happy to go into more detail on any of them. So how are we going to do this? This is actually and I think maybe one of the MIT perspectives that we took to this problem. We didn't tackle this problem like a pharmaceutical company or like a pharmacist. We tackled it like engineers. And we asked, what are the design criteria? What are we going to have to be able to do? What are the environments that these pills are going to be in? And then we tackled it in that way. So number one, it has to be something that a patient is familiar to a patient, that they're willing to swallow. And so we've been able to engineer these down into relatively small capsules, similar to a fish oil capsule. It has to, once it reaches the stomach, it has to change. It has to change into a configuration that allows it to stay in the stomach for a long period of time. Now, a few other people have tried to tackle this problem historically. They used approaches that were not able to survive the gastric environment, things like hydrogels and things like that. These materials were rapidly broken down by the stomach because that's what the stomach is meant to do. What we had to develop was materials or anyway, find materials. These are not novel materials. These are materials that would be recognized to any medical device firm, but engineer those materials so that they could survive in the gastric environment. And then they need to release drug. And then when they're done releasing drug, they need to break apart and pass like a piece of celery, like a piece of indigestible food, through the rest of your GI tract. So there are three components of the system, and I won't go into too much detail on all of them, but number one, you have to have a flexible element in the center that allows you to fit into a capsule. You need to engineer that properly. You need to have drug polymer arms that can do controlled drug release. Now, this is a problem that Bob has been working on for 35, 40 years, and so we actually have a pretty good handle on how to do that. And then you have to have designed failure points in your system. So these are materials that are not that dissimilar, perhaps, from things like enteric coatings that are well known in the pharmaceutical industry. But you have to engineer them to serve as these design breakpoints in a dosage form. So using them in a different way than what they've been done before. When you do this, and again, this is where I mentioned that we really tackled this problem not as a pharmacy problem, but as an engineering problem. We used everything from finite. We have mechanical engineers working on this, chemical engineers, biochemists, polymer processing experts. You can use a combination of finite element modeling in order to get the geometry right. You can use in vitro testing in order to simulate stomachs and understand what you need to survive to be able to stay in the stomach for a long period of time. And then in vivo evaluation. So we heard a little bit about Bill Gates being kind of a patron for one before. He was for us as well. And this allowed us to really tackle this problem in an unusual way, which was we got a large colony of 120-pound pigs that we began testing in right from the get-go. And it was kind of a fail hard, fail fast approach, but what it did was it allowed us to do in vivo evaluation of dosage forms from the very beginning to understand what are the properties that we need both endoscopically and radiographically in order to survive in this harsh environment, to be able to, so this dosage form has actually been in that pig stomach for over a month and a half. It's not causing any injury to the pig. It's a flexible polymer that can withstand the gastric forces, but not be strong enough that it's going to cause any injury to the gastric mucosa. It's not adhesive to the mucosa, so it doesn't disrupt the normal protective barriers in the stomach. It doesn't float, it doesn't swell, it doesn't do any of the kind of fancy strategies that people have tried in the past. It's really quite simple when you get down to it, but it's able to release drug for a long period of time and then break apart and pass so that it's like it was never there before. So we've done this now in over 300 pig experiments. We have done all kinds of safety evaluations to really tackle this problem of safety, and have now pushed it out into a startup company, as Tron said. We've only been around for about we've been working on the technology for about 4 years. The company was founded last year by Bob and myself, and one of our CEO, who's very experienced venture capitalist in Boston. The dosage forms are readily swallowed by standard, much like a lot of over-the-counter products. We can do controlled drug release. We can tune that. We can optimize it for a variety of small molecule drugs, everything from lipophilic, hydrophobic drugs. We've been able to do to both formulate into these systems and also to demonstrate in vivo. So in addition, I think one problem that may be not as obvious, but if you want to make a long-lasting dosage form like this that's going to live in the stomach for a prolonged period of time, you need to protect that drug. Drug stability is critical, obviously, and so we've been able to show that these dosage forms are stable in the harsh gastric environment for over a month for a number of drugs, including drugs that actually are not intrinsically stable under these conditions, but within the polymer matrices that we use, we're able to stabilize them. So I want to tell you about one of the applications, and this comes to why Bill Gates wanted to fund this. Malaria remains a huge problem globally, despite escalating effort at trying to eradicate it and escalating cost of those efforts. It's still, almost 500,000 people die a year from malaria. And so the efforts of organizations like Bill Gates' foundation and WHO are starting to move towards the idea that in order to eradicate this, we're going to have to administer drug to a large fraction of the population in Africa. Unfortunately, trying to actually implement that is incredibly costly, and if you have an adherence problem, which you have, you're not going to be successful. And they've been able to do a lot of modeling of this and have discovered that their eradication efforts are not going to work because you would need patients to take their medicine continuously for a number of days, and they're not going to do that. So they became interested in the idea, could we come up with a single administration dosage form? So you go to the village, you give them their pill, and they're going to get a week's worth of drug or 2 weeks worth of drug of their mass drug administration. And so what we've done is tackle that problem. And so here's using 2 drugs. Actually, one of them got the Nobel Prize earlier this year, Ivermectin, and been able to use our platform to develop dosage forms that can deliver a week or 2 weeks worth of drug in this way. And so we're moving forward with developing the GMP manufacturing capabilities to push these out into humans in about 18 months with the plan to do the field studies in Africa that would let us demonstrate this in a mass drug administration campaign. But it should be obvious as well that this technology can be applied to a variety of commercial products here in the United States. And so we are working with a number of pharma partners to identify the right candidates for within their pipelines where this technology could be used. and in addition, identifying candidates for us to push forward for US applications as well. So I'd like to thank the team. We've got a large team, large and growing team. We've been rapidly expanding the group to tackle these problems and move forward into clinical trials. Bob, co-founder with me, Gio Traverso is a gastroenterologist who was very helpful in this and at MIT, and also Amy Schulman, who's our CEO and a partner at Polaris in Boston. Thank you.